Live. All right. So we are now live. Hey, good day, everybody. Good afternoon to everybody. So sorry for the delay. Okay. So this is Coach John here of Project Pond. Okay. So your life coach, study coach, special education teacher, or whatever you want to call me. So I'm here to help out middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college students overcome their neurodevelopmental difficulties. So we're here on our live stream. We're both on YouTube and on Facebook Live. Okay, so we're here to ask a bunch of questions to everybody. So, but first, I want to shout out to my wife who's going to be helping me upload the link. So, the link on our YouTube is on our groups in the Project Pond Conversations, as well as our live stream, which is on my personal account, will be pasted on the page. No? We pasted on the page just about now. So yeah. So for anybody who's watching this, you guys might be wondering what we're doing here. So my name is John Maria. I'm a life coach. I'm diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm married to my wife, who's diagnosed with inattentive type ADHD. And so what I've been doing for the past 10 years is I've been working with individuals, mainly teens and young adults, who really need a mentor in order for them to help cope with a bunch of things. And was on this 10th year because of this COVID-19 thing that happened that enabled us to finally share what needs, yeah. So, sorry, the broadcast was interrupted on our Facebook. Okay, yeah. All right, so here we are, we're back here. Okay, now. All right, so yeah. So we're going to be answering a few of the questions that were submitted via our um, via our survey here. So yeah, some of the questions here, I won't lie to you guys, it's really on the heavy side for for a lot of them, to be perfectly honest with you. So yeah. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be copy pasting some of these questions one by one. All right. So we'll be putting them down in the comments below. So the first question we want to answer here is, what are your suggestions for a person with depression and Asperger's to cope by himself after leaving a toxic family, given that he would be alone with no one to take care of him? So this particular situation just tells you how serious this really is. Okay. A lot of people say that ADHD does not exist, depression does not exist, that sort of thing. But if it prompts you to go as far on a drastic measure to just want to leave and things like that, and of course, answering this question is really a multi-faceted thing. So the first thing we have to understand is what Asperger's is, and then what depression is. So Asperger's is known as mild autism. I'm not going to get down into the big details here, but when you have Asperger's, it's basically when you have mild autism. So what does that mean? It means that you have the features of autism, but then you also have a lot of aspects of your life develop normally, like your language skills, your intelligence, and all of those things. So mainly nowadays, when people think of people with autism, they think of individuals who aren't as functional as the rest. But when you have mild autism, which is also known as Asperger's, you're as functional as most people. You go to college, you graduate, you go get a job. But in terms of especially the social aspect of life, and also your rigidity, right? Your lack of flexibility because of the neurological thing in your head, it's tough for you to function. So, and tying that in with depression, it's very common for individuals with neurodevelopmental concerns, or pretty much any person with a disability, to also have some sort of mental health issue. Yeah, and so so when you have somebody with Asperger's and you have depression as well within that person, you basically have a person who is impaired on multiple from multiple directions, and that can be difficult for a lot of people. So now we have to compound that with the idea that He has issues with the family. Okay, so there are studies that show that when there's a person with a neurodevelopmental condition or a mental health issue within the family, the sad reality is that the family dynamic also suffers, right? So, and this is a real fear among individuals who are here. So, um, I want to answer this in a couple of ways. All right. So, one is I know if you're an individual within your developmental condition and you're listening to me right now, you're looking at this question. Somehow, your feelings of negativity are geared towards the parents of this child. I mean, what the parents might have done and things like that for this person to feel this way. And if you're a parent, you're probably supportive of the feelings. I mean, parents aren't really they can't be that bad, right? So this kid, why does he think this way, right? So the mere fact that we're sort of biased in this way towards a certain perspective means that we it really means that there is this need for empathy. Actually, people have been telling me when I was designing my channel, are you targeting parents or are you targeting the young adults themselves, the teenagers? And when I said both, some of them had concerns that, hey, maybe this is not the best way to do it. You have to focus your market. Well, for me, I actually want to focus on the idea of reconciliation within families. Okay, so that's why I still want to broaden that target audience. So when I'm talking to you guys right now, I expect many parents. Shout out to all the parents watching right now, whether you're watching this live or you're watching this on replay. Hope that you guys get something. Please like the video. Please react with a smiley face over there. The face goes, it's my daughter's favorite. Whenever we press that emoji, it's been something that's been that I have fun with my daughter. And on that topic, so the way I think about it is this. Okay, with a question like this, we have to first ask the question. How toxic is the family environment? Okay, I have seen the whole spectrum. You have families that are very caring, and there are families that are extremely neglectful. Right? I don't know where this person falls in between. Okay. One thing that I would recommend though is this. Right. One thing I would recommend is to find out, right, whether or not this person can still function at least normally, right, within that family setting. If not, then there has to be some sort of treatment available there, whether a consultation with doctors or psychologists or family therapy. It's very important. But the key principle here is that the key principle here is that a person with these two conditions might have the dangers of, let's say, might have desires of committing suicide and things like that, right? So they might have totally impairing thoughts that disable them from functioning. So all these questions have to be asked. I've seen solutions that have occurred across the board. There have been families who have been very receptive to family therapy. I don't do that, by the way. Licensed psychologists do that, or even pastors from churches and such have been able to reconcile individuals to increase that empathy and that sympathy between them, right? So in situations like that, I've seen that work. I've also seen instances where that did not work, and you needed to separate the child, put the child, let's say, with a different relative. So that's just so that the child or the teenager in this case avoid that toxic environment for now, so that he or she could function. So I guess my easy answer there is that my answer. I mean, that's a long answer to our first question today, but so far, I guess what I just want to say is that I want you guys to be aware of what Asperger's is and what depression is, and those two things co-occur quite frequently nowadays. That the solution is a whole spectrum, okay, which involves family therapy, and displacing yourself from that toxic environment, okay. So yeah. So that's pretty much it. So I have had one case before wherein a person has had both parents pass away, and it's been tough for them to find the place where they're at. Okay, And I actually had a conversation with somebody from the DSWD, at least locally here in the Philippines, or the Department of Social Welfare and Development, um, that basically provides some some laws that allow for individuals who are really um, who really have their primary caretakers taken away from them, like for example both parents dying and the siblings are not there are no siblings or there are no close relatives. So this individual has to be taken care of by the government, right? So I've met a lot of these cases as well. So yeah, I guess it goes to government support as well. You have to take care of these individuals for sure. Okay, so yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna go to comment number two here. Question number two, uh, right here. So the question here is, how do you guys address the cases of PTSD among your clients? And as an expert, what advice can you share to people who's very much exposed to people who are prone to PTSD but has no scientific or educational background on handling such? So examples that this comment included are field commanders in the military. So this is a very interesting question. I do not have a background of helping people in the military except a personal experience I had years ago with a friend who was a U.S. military veteran. So shout out to you. You know who you are. We were in Japan together and we helped out one another through a difficult situation. So it was New Year's Eve when I was with him in Nagoya, and there were so many fireworks. So when you've been in the military, you've heard of gunshots and things like that. Chances are when you're near fireworks, you're gonna feel defensive and you're gonna feel anxious. So that's what PTSD does. By the way, PTSD stands for post traumatic stress disorder, right? So we know this commonly from the military, but there are actually that's what most people know about it. But actually, PTSD occur. Uh, it actually occurs in multiple ways. So, for example, victims of abuse as well, right? Victims of bullying can experience PTSD. So normally, when I deal with PTSD among my clients, it's within that context that they were bullied extensively for being different, which is very, very sad. That's something that I don't want to happen in society. I don't. I think that people should, really just stop. That's something it's hard for me to really empathize with the idea that just because a person is different or even worse disabled that you would bully them. So these individuals eventually have the PTSD symptoms. So I just want to be very clear here. I'm not by any means an expert per se on PTSD, despite these experiences that I've had with these clients and this friend of mine from the military. Okay, but the way it is addressed, first and foremost, I do know this is universally known, even by life coaches, non-mental health or medical health professionals. That is that they have to be aware of their triggers. They have to be aware of what makes them anxious. Such okay. So, what would I recommend to you if you don't have that scientific or educational background? No? Um, what I would recommend to you is to go through some life coaching training, right? So, shout out to Dr. Randy Deliosa, for example. He's the head of the Life Coach Association of the Philippines. So they have frameworks there. Even in my church, in my local church, in Christ's Commission Fellowship, we have a program called Glorious Hope, and these programs enable people go through being coached by a trained life coach, right? And then they have the option of being trained as a life coach and having their own circle of coaches as well. So I was not a practicing life coach in this context, but my wife was. But I was a product of being coached by this environment. And here I actually discovered many issues that I really needed to resolve at this point in time, like things with my biological father and things like that. So PTSD just is so in a way PTSD is just a very stronger form or a very strong reaction, uh, a strong version of the even the small traumas and issues and hangups we have in our life. Um, so what I would advise you is to go through programs like this and then apply them to your own circle in the military. Okay, so I just wanted to tell all the viewers right now that taking care of our military, actually, from a mental health perspective, is super. I would say under talked about or under prioritized, given that We just went through, several wars and insurgencies, the Marawi incident down south, of course, for our soldiers. I think that they deserve better care, and we definitely have to support them for sure. Okay, so thank you for that question. Okay, so let me see if there. By the way, guys, just want to tell you, you guys can comment live, and we will try to answer these live questions as well as we move forward. Okay. So, but for now, we'll move on to we'll move on to the third question here. Okay. Moving on to the third question. Okay. So the question here, number three, is this was another submitted question. It says here, I'm okay with my job, but for others, this might happen for them. How do you handle any discrimination at work because of your condition? If I file a complaint to HR, my boss might give me a hard time. So actually, I've encountered this a couple of times. So, and the two times that I did encounter it within a corporate setting, the human resources was they were very open, right? In fact, in the one case that I didn't really handle this person from a professional standpoint, but she's a friend of mine who worked for a very well-known company, and she was having trouble and impairment in her workplace as a result of her ADHD. And what HR said is that would have appreciated if you opened up to us in advance. She didn't get fired, she didn't get discriminated upon. In fact, the resources department was very supportive of her. And on this, actually, I'm going to say something that will also address some of the further questions down the line when it comes to having a job. Is that um, governments all across the world do have ways of supporting individuals with neurodevelopmental and mental health concerns in the workplace. So that goes from looking for a job and things like that. So within that context, just looking at it locally, you guys might be surprised. No, we do have an interesting incentive for employing PWDs in the Philippines. So aside from the fact that you get the privilege of a PWD card, because when you have a mental health condition, they put a psychosocial condition there. If you have a ADHD, it's usually termed as a learning disability, at least within our law. Okay, from a medical standpoint, that doesn't add up, but it's okay. If you have autism, it says I think it says mental disability at this point. But the point is that when you have a disability and you're hired by a company, they do get a tax incentive, and it's pretty big. So consult an accountant, consult a lawyer, because companies, if they know you're capable of the work and you have a disability, then they might just prefer you and want to hire you because if there's a tax break involved from hiring you. So yeah, and we also have this requirement already that for everyone, if you're a company that I would say is medium sized, meaning you have at least 100 employees, at least 1% have to be PWD. So 1 out of 100, if you have 100 employees, at least one of them has to be PWD. And you actually see this all around. Like when you go to SM, you'd see people with Down syndrome being hired as janitors, which I'm really, really happy with whenever I see that. Just fills my heart like, yeah, we're doing something right here. Okay, so it's not true that everything happening in the context of PWD advocacy in our third world country and things like that is all negative. It's not true. Okay, we have a lot of positive things also happening. Okay, so right. So, but nowadays want to I do want to say this, that discrimination comes in many forms. Okay, so when, for example, you can't meet deadlines, right? And then of course, there's this tension with your workmates, and because you're unable to meet these deadlines and things like that because of your condition. I wouldn't say that is discrimination per se. I think that's just a natural consequence of not being able to meet for that goal. I think discrimination is when they go and tell you that, oh, I'm better than you because you have ADHD and I'm all functional. I'm more functional than you are. So this is a touchy subject to be on, right? But at least from a systemic perspective, from a managerial perspective, I haven't really encountered yet serious cases of discrimination towards people with neurodevelopmental conditions. In fact, the employers I've worked with as a job coach, so I do that a little bit. Uh, they have all been extra supportive of hiring um, the cases that I handle my coaches, and who have been fortunate enough also to learn in the workplace. So yeah, thank you for that question. Right. So number four, the next question that we have here is how do I stay calm when telling my friends and family my ADHD is not a joke? I always get mad and I'm seen as pikon. Okay, pikon means that you get ticked off, right? Easily because of my quick reaction. If I say it calmly, I don't think they will take me seriously. Are there attachment patterns connected to ADHD with regards to other people that we should notice? So, what I'm seeing here in the latter part of your question is you're asking, is there a social component to ADHD? Is there a relationship component to ADHD? Absolutely. Okay, absolutely. So, um, but for the former part of your question, for the first part of your question, which has to do with not treating ADHD as a joke, this is something that we're still working at, and while I believe we've pretty much established scientifically that ADHD as a body of impairment should be treated as a real disorder, there have been counter voices that provide contrasting evidence to the idea of ADHD existing. Now, these counter voices, to be honest with you, are not voices that I necessarily just silence. I don't want to silence them. Okay. In fact, I've been listening to them, and most of these voices have been saying that the people who say that ADHD does not exist, they have been saying like, oh, there's ADHD is we shouldn't be addressing it we shouldn't be addressing it using meds, or we shouldn't be addressing it using behavioral treatment. We should be addressing it using nutrition. We should be addressing it by altering the school system. We should be addressing it using so many other systemic things. So while they attack ADHD as a body of impairment, right, as a legit condition, one thing I would say is that none of these voices have ever told me that ADHD is just a joke. Like, they still see the problem as a legitimate issue. It's just that they have a different take on it. So, um, so I do know that when a person comes from, so I do know that when we're talking about some of the claims of ADHD generally in this debate going on, um, these things should not be cited to simply say that ADHD does not exist. ADHD definitely, as a body of impairment, does exist. So, but your question is, how do you stay calm? When you have friends and family who don't make a big deal out of it. Well, it's a difficult question to answer, to be honest with you. And the framework I work with when it comes to this is coming from the perspective of Stephen Covey, right? He's the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and the first habit he basically mentions is to become proactive. So you have to focus on the things that you can control. That's what being proactive is, and not be reactive, but just to focus on things you cannot control. I think that when parents, when family members, when friends don't get it, I think you need to have a group that supports you and gets it, right? Okay. If anything, I'm more than happy to talk to parents as well, just so they get the idea here and things like that. But what I'm guessing is also happening here is that you live in an environment where people have a high level threshold, of emotional control, which means that everybody expects to just joke. Everybody expects everybody else to just joke around and be happy and things like that. But you're not that type of person, right? So there's a lot of things that have to be dealt with here. So even in family therapy as well, right? But generally, what I would say is, I think that if they will not change, okay, you can't control what they do. Because I'm talking here as a life coach, okay, but you can control what you do about it, okay. So I actually recommend the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, for older people. But there's a easier to read version called the Seven Habits of Highly Effective Teens. I like that book because it's so structured. It gives a lot of explanations and solutions to the problems that the people with neurodevelopmental conditions handle. And again, people with neurodevelopmental conditions generally want a structured approach to solving issues. So that book does it, and it's done wonders for a lot of my students. And I give credit to the authors Stephen and Sean Covey, father and son combo. So when we've done it. Hey, I just want to say hi to Sheena, okay, and Mikhail. All right, so they're here, they're watching. Thank you for being here. Please hit those happy buttons, the big happy button like this. Next time, I actually plan to bring my daughter here and just to just allow her to also flash those smiles as well. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Anton, hi, I miss you too. I'm sorry that I can't use my Goblin deck against you just yet. I'm really being careful in this COVID-19 situation. So yeah, thank you guys for being here. All right. So let's go on to the next question. Right. So this one is from a parent. Shout out to all parents there. I love you. Okay. Thank you for putting up with us. That's the first thing I want to say. Thank you for putting up with us. And I think that any time that a parent has a child with a with any disability, it's a demonstration of unconditional love. In my opinion, it's a demonstration of grace. Okay, it really is a demonstration of grace. And so the next question here is, my son is ADHD, both inattentive of impulsive. So combined type. Shout out to all the ADHD combined types. We are awesome. Okay. He tends to be explosive with his emotions. Okay, don't say. All right. Either he's too hyper happy or he's giggle angry. I think you should talk to my wife. You guys can have a therapy group together. Okay. And it says here, I scold him and make him understand that it's not good to do that. He realizes it too late already. I don't want him to be like that with his parents, with his peers, because I told him I want him to have good friends. How do I manage his impulsivity? He has a follow-up question to this, but we'll answer this one first, okay? First and foremost, scolding is a form of a punishment. Now, I'm not against punishments and discipline. There are many types of punishment and discipline that you can do that's quite legit. Now, the reason why I would be against scolding in this situation is because scolding as a discipline issue is we assume that the kid has control over his or her actions. Okay, that's the one thing we assume about this situation. But when people who have the impulsive tendencies of ADHD oftentimes do not have control over their impulses. Okay, they do develop better control as they grow up, right? But to scold them for their impulses means that you're inherently scolding them for an issue, right? You're scolding them for an issue in which they have no control over. It's kind of like scolding a person with dyslexia who has a hard time reading, right, for not reading, or scolding a person without legs for not running. So I wouldn't scold him. My approach would be different. My approach would be to change the environment in such a manner that it would be conducive for him to exercise impulse control. So what does this mean? It means putting him in a school system that is that would be forgiving, like a ladder type system, right? Another thing that I would recommend would be putting on a daily basis, putting in the right amount of structure and controls, like having a schedule, having a good physical structure. If you go to the YouTube channel, okay, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We already have videos on this in our series on the new normal. So we've already had videos that cover having a structure and things like that. So I would do that, and then allow him to develop improved impulsivity over time. Now I want to tell you, in answering this question, that I'm a 33-year-old guy, and my wife will tell you I still have impulsive tendencies, right? I still have hyperactivity tendencies. The other night, I was reading books rather to my almost 2-year-old daughter, and she was the one who told me, "Dad, let's sleep." Right? And I'm like, oh yeah, we've read so many books already. So Until now, I have some issues with it. So it's not necessarily something that can be controlled. So it's not something that can be disciplined. Okay, so my approach is to change the environment to develop self control, but it's hard to discipline for the control of impulsivity per se because it's not within that person's control. Okay. So anyway, before we go on to the next question, I want to say hi to May Nival, who's here. Thank you so much for commenting, learning a lot. Thanks for the session. I'm learning a lot from doing this. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy and just excited to do this. And this is the first time we're doing a live session, and all of these just really encouraging. Okay, so follow up to the past question here that was just answered. We are trying to find his niche. So same kid, 14 years old with combined type ADHD. Is it okay to push it? Like we made him join ukulele. He liked it and he learns fast, but he doesn't play. He only does it when prompted or if it's training only. We told him to try keyboard piano. He liked it, still learns fast, but easily gets frustrated, okay, then gives up. He likes to sing and dance, but he only does it because it's mandatory in school. He's a red belter in Taekwondo, but when it's not training day, he doesn't stretch or stuff. But he says he loves Taekwondo more than anything. So how to develop his passion? He loves the arts too. My opinion is that, okay, the issue here is more than just those activities. Okay, it's not a question of which activities to give to your son. I think it's an overarching thing, right? As a parent, of course, we're all proud of our kids when they achieve something, when they get into a hobby, they excel at it, and things like that. But we must not let we must not let them feel, okay, that our approval of them, okay, is dependent upon their performance. Okay, they must understand that we love them and we support them, regardless of their performance in all of these things, right? And when you look at that, that framework, right? That you just love your son, your kid, and then you just allow him to explore all of these things on his or her own, right? Right? I know, by the way, the parents love their children unconditionally, right? But sometimes it's when they get to their teens and young adults, they begin to test it. They begin to question that. They begin to go, oh wait, if I fail, right, how will my parents react? And if you react in a, oh no, you failed math and things like that, really, okay, they start to have performance anxiety and things like that. Actually, people with a disability, so this is not just for people with neurodevelopmental difficulties, but any disability, tend to have performance anxiety. So I would say that the primary thing here to change is not your approach nor the activities, but rather to change your perspective or your perspective in looking at your child, right? Whether or not he or she develops, right, in the way that you imagine, right? For as long as, you affirm him as him, right? Okay, and then and by the way, when that person tries out something new, right? When the person learns a new song on the ukulele, or like you wins bronze medal for taekwondo, okay, real achievements, okay, no fake trophies or anything like that. That's not something I'm for. So, but when you have these situations, right? Praise them. Yeah, yeah, good job. You really appreciate the fact that you're developing yourself. And that way, the focus is no longer them trying to please you as their parent, but the process now becomes more automated. It's more geared towards themselves. It's more about them learning to be better versions of themselves as opposed to them trying to please you as the parent. And trust me, when they have that situation, it'll be better. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you, like, for example, my dad just tutored me in math when I was in grade 5 because I was really, really bad in math in my early years of school. He taught me math. He was very strict with me when it comes to math, but he never made me feel like his love for me, okay, was dependent upon my performance in math. He just said, well, you're bad at math, so I'm going to teach you. Eventually, by the way, I learned that I loved math and I started becoming good at math, and I started excelling at math to the point that I started competing for my school, right? And it was me now asking my dad, can you drive me on a Saturday morning so I can do math? Yeah, like what kind of kid would do that, right? But because it was no longer my parents' approval that mattered in this case, but it was more about me It was more about me um, wanting to improve myself, and that's where we want to get to. A helpful video I'd like to recommend. One last thing on this topic is please watch this video called "Clean and Green." All right, under Stephen Covey. So that's under Franklin Covey. I'm not associated with the with the website whatsoever, but definitely the Clean and Green example of how Stephen Covey taught his eldest son, Stephen Jr., right? How to the process of becoming independent. That's something that I'd like to share with you guys. All right. Okay. So guys, hello. We got a few viewers. Please put a comment there. I just have a quick question for you guys. Okay. So how is your day today? You guys happy? Happy today? Okay. Ready to listen and to interact here? Just please give a hi here. Please give a hi. Right. So type something down in the comments there. Yay. Okay. Hi there, Mikhail. All right. So I see you guys. I see you guys. Thank you for this. Okay. So let's go on to the next question. All right. Next question here. It says here for a person with a neurodevelopmental condition, what is the difference between liking someone and being obsessed with them? And what should you do when you have a crush on someone? Okay. So this question I want to address it. Okay. Generally, it may be a strange question. So you don't go to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders and you go to Asperger's, you go to ADHD, and you go, okay, they're gonna have trouble when they like someone or they have a crush on someone. Okay. The reason why we don't see that there is because this is a typical problem among teenagers, right? But I would say this: the experience of this, right, liking someone, being obsessed with them, and things like that, becomes a little bit more difficult for people with neurodevelopmental condition because of one thing. And that one thing is emotional control, right? So, emotional control is an executive skill. That is something that we learn through experience. So, for example, when a guy courts a girl, he gets busted, he feels bad. Of course, it happened to me many times. Okay, yeah. So now I move forward. Okay, I recover from it. I have better emotional control. The problem is inherently we have problems with our emotional control, and so there is this issue now that surfaces whenever big emotion events such as having crushes and liking somebody um, starts to occur in one's life. This is also one of the reasons why I'm an advocate of having professionals like myself who work more, especially with teens and young adults, because the issues become very different because you put sex hormones into play, and all of those things just makes the whole matter of having a neurodevelopmental and or a mental health comorbid condition much more complicated. Okay, so now the other thing I want to say is let's look at this from the perspective of a person also with a neurodevelopmental condition. So generally we have emotional control issues, but more specific to, let's say, the condition of autism is that it's hard for them to see the gray area in things. So it's a matter of liking somebody or being obsessed with them, right? Actually, what I would recommend to you if you have this issue is to put it on a spectrum. How obsessed are you, and how much do you like this person, right? Maybe there's an in between there. Use things like, I think about her almost all the time. So if you think about the person almost all the time, that might mean that you are obsessed with that person. But if this person, enters your mind, a couple of days, it doesn't really a couple of times during the day, and it doesn't really interfere with the things that you have to do during the day, then I would say you probably have a crush on someone. You like somebody, and so what do? It's very difficult to if you're a teenager, if you're a young teenager between the age of I'd say 13 and 16 or 12 and 16, the emotional control environment here becomes very difficult. So what I would recommend is to have people to open up about this to your dad, especially if you're a man, open up about this to your dad. If you're a girl, open up about this to your mom, right? Open up about this to your psychologist, to me, your life coach, and such. You get to release it, okay? So you get to make, I would say, level-headed decisions, objective decisions on the matter, rather than to follow your impulse. By the way, one of the highlights of having a neurodevelopmental condition is that we follow our impulses, right? So what we want to try to do, sometimes, by the way, our impulses are not really wrong. So for example, when I told my wife that I want to date her only after about a year of friendship with her, right? She thought I was just being impulsive because I had ADHD. But it's something that I thought about over. I talked about it with pastors in church. I talked about it with my own life coach, and he said, "Yeah, you should go for it. You should go for it." Yeah. So when they gave me that advice, okay, it's not that it's always wrong to follow your impulse, but you have to put it under an objective lens. Okay. So good luck to you. Your love life, it's probably going to be colorful from here on out, and I'm praying for you. Okay, Lord, please help you because this is a very tumultuous or difficult time in a person's life if you have a neurodevelopmental condition. So if parents here are listening, take note of that. Your kids, when they're teens, they need your support. Okay, you don't have to fix it for them. You don't have to, tell them all the advice in the world. Sit down there, listen to them. That's gonna be awesome already. Okay. So let's now go to number 8 here on our questions. Okay. When it comes to work, am I expected to be able to perform like everybody else? What if I can't? Do you run from what makes you comfortable and find something better, or do you stay, Coach? What keeps you going? All right. Okay. So, well, I'll tell you this. Okay. Uh, the way I want to answer this question is I want to I want you guys to understand that disability is also defined by context. Okay, right? We know on this channel that we do talk about we talk about we talk about the neurology of having a neurodevelopmental condition and things like that. We know that it's in the brain, right? Okay, so but um, even through that, I do want to stress that context plays a huge role. What do I mean by that? So, for example, I know somebody who's a lawyer. Okay, now if you're a lawyer, you have a lot of paperwork for the rest of your life. Okay, so if any of you guys have ADHD and want to be lawyers, that's okay. My support goes out to you, but understand it's going to be paperwork from here on out. Okay, so um, so now his ADHD really impairs him because he needs to be in front of a computer typing things down. He needs to be reading cases. He really needs to take Ritalin every day, which costs a lot, of course. Even if you're a lawyer, I guess you earn far more than average, but still, the cost of the medications that we take, of course, even with the discount and all, right, and the help there, it's difficult. So in his context, his ADHD is really pronounced. It's really showing within his context, even as a fully functioning adult, right? But I also know this person, roughly his same age, who's married, never went to college. As a kid, he was diagnosed with ADHD. He was made to take uh, methylphenidate to keep his attention in school. But after he graduated, I believe he started taking up welding and construction-related work, and now he works with his wife. They're also engaged in a disability-related business, and so it's a lot of just assembly of things, and he's really good at that. And he also loves his role as a dad to his 3 kids, and so within that context, he doesn't need the medication anymore, and so his ability to cope with that context is really good. In fact, his wife. When I talked to his wife is so amazed at him because he's such a structured guy. He's such an engaged guy with his kids and things like that. So when you compare these 2 cases, right? Perhaps you have a similar neurology or the tendency in their brains for ADHD, but because the context is so different, you don't really see the impairment so much in one guy as compared to the other guy. So, all right, we're all different. Okay, we're all different. Now, when you tell me, am I expected to perform like everybody else? You have to tell me who everybody else is, right? Are these guys call center agents in your highly structured building with no windows? Are these artists that you have to paint together with? Are these chefs that you have to cook in the kitchen with? Are they co-teachers, right? Okay. So it's, I believe, answering your question is less a matter of finding out whether you can keep up with other people. So that's you comparing yourself to other people, but it's more about finding your niche, finding that environment that works for you. I will tell you guys that I don't, I come from a family where all my my older brother plus three older siblings that I grew up with who are first cousins, but I treat them as siblings. They all went to the corporate world, and they're all very successful vice president level executives. But I don't think I can survive in that context, like 8 to 5, right? Driving through traffic. That's not my thing, right? So I don't think I would survive it. I don't think I'd be able to keep up with. That's why I admire my older cousins so much. Oh, shout out to my older brother, my three older cousins, right? For being so great in the corporate world, and I'm very proud of them. But I can't do what they do. Honestly, I cannot do what they do. So I found my niche here. I found my niche, and even the weaknesses I went through become valuable because I'm able to share them here. I'm able to share them to my coaches, and I'm able to share them to the families to encourage them. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is where God put me. So in the end, I would tell you to find the right context, right? It's not a matter of trying to. It's not a matter of trying to do it the same way other people are doing it. It's a matter of finding the right context that's for you. Okay. So, all right. Thank you for that question, by the way. I pray for you that God will, enter into your life, lead you, and you'll be in an awesome place. And when that happens, please post in our Project Bond conversations. Tag me, and let's praise God together, all right? Okay. So the next question is related to the last one, which is how do people with disabilities like ADHD or ASD get good jobs like everyone else, right? So I mentioned earlier on in this video that there are organizations, there are offices that allow us to get incentives for hiring PWDs. So that's one way to do it, right? But I want to explain again just my previous answer. You have to find the right context that's for you, okay? And that right context is the trickier part, okay? And again, I'm just gonna go back to Stephen Covey in his perspective called the eighth habit here. The way to find the right thing for you, I have a guide for you guys. Is in Japan they have a version of this called ikigai. It's a meme right now. Maybe you guys can look that up. But I actually like Covey's perspective that ikigai because it's slightly different. The right context for you is the intersection between four things, which is there a need for it? Meaning, will people pay for it? Number two is it something that adheres to your conscience? So it's something that you're doing well. If you're doing it, you're doing good for the world, right? The next one is it something that you're good at talent-wise, okay? So, for example, I don't think I can be an NBA player as much as I'd love that, okay? Can't be an NBA player, don't have the talent or the physical attributes to become an NBA player, all right? But I do have pretty good listening and communication skills, so that allows me to be a life coach. And lastly, do I have a passion for it? Which means, is it something that I like to do? So you want to look for the intersection between these four things, right? Doesn't have to be a perfect intersection, but something that has at least a little bit of these four. Okay, so some of my students have used this method, and they've worked in farms, they've worked in regular offices. So it's not like some grand dream, to find that context. Some of them have become artists, programmers, and things like that. They're perfectly happy where they are, So shout out to you guys. These success stories, by the way, are the things that keep me going because I just want more. I kind of want to see it for the next generation and the next. So yeah, to prove, by the way, that people with neurodevelopmental conditions are awesome. Yes, we can contribute good to the world. Okay, it's not about becoming successful in the most classical sense, money, wealth, fame, all of these things. It's more about contribution, making the world a better place. Okay, right. So our second to the last question here is, how do you separate yourself from your neurodevelopmental/mental illness? Can you or should you? I love this question, right? this is a question that talks about our identity. So this is a question that has to do with identity. The short answer is it's not the biggest deal in the world. Okay, whether or not you associate yourself strongly with your condition or you're not super open about it is not a huge deal. Okay, that's not the so the thing is, again, context is very different from one case to the next. For example, for me, because I work in the industry, of course I'm open about my condition, right? But I also know another guy who's a lawyer. He can't really be open up against a condition because there's no precedent in our local context whether that can be used against him, right? That he has a condition, that he practices something as sensitive as law and things like that, right? But my opinion is that identity is not something that associating ourselves with a label or not is not the central issue. Okay, I believe that if you associate yourself with, let's say, ADHD, you want to advocate for ADHD, perfect. You probably need to associate yourself strongly with ADHD, like I am doing. If you're advocating for it, of course you have to. That's part of what you have to do. But if, for instance, it's just a matter of your self-awareness, you're not super open about it to the public or to the world, that's perfectly fine as well. So, so the idea of separating yourself from your mental illness, can you? Yeah, no. You can separate or integrate yourself with your condition as much as you want. It's not a given that you have to be all out or you have to be you have to hide in the woods when it comes to your condition, right? Each person's context is different. Okay, when it comes to this question, I would take the patient approach. Like when you're sure about it, then if you're comfortable opening about it, then open up about it, right? I don't believe that you should be forced or anything like that. So can you separate yourself identity-wise? Yeah. No. I personally only have one important identity in my life, and that is my identity in Christ. My faith and such, right? And how it charges me and the mission God it's given to me to help people with neurodevelopmental conditions, given to me and my family to do that. That's the only thing, right, that I associate myself with. The condition of ADHD can change, right? In fact, it happened for Asperger's. Technically, Asperger's is not a condition right now in the latest edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. They changed it to just Autism Spectrum Disorder, level 1, 2, 3. But I don't believe that it's a big issue whether people use Asperger's or not. If you were diagnosed with Asperger's 20 years ago and you've been using it for the last 20 years, that's okay. People will still understand it. Okay? So should you, okay? It's a matter of your own context, okay? But I wouldn't rush it. I'd be patient with that question, okay? So if you're watching here, give me a message. I can give you some follow-up answers to that, okay? All right, so we have a question here from Miss. We have a couple of questions here that I want to answer. So some live questions that were given here. One is from Louis Rassing. Shout out to you, Ma'am Louis. I love you. The bacon was awesome. Okay. Do you need to disclose to your employer that you have a neurodevelopmental disorder? Is it good if you do? Well, my experience, Ma'am Louis, has been that it has been good, right? But of course, you need to select companies that have strong HR programs to help you support this, because a lot of companies might not have the facility, the means, or the understanding to help facilitate this. It's good because if you're capable of the job, for instance, or your son is capable of the job, your son, daughter is capable of the job who has a neurodevelopmental condition, and the company already knows that the person has a condition. You disclose it, you put in the proper papers, that company gets a tax break. And it's not small, okay? It gets a tax break for hiring you if you're the one with the condition, or your children if they have the condition. So, yeah. But of course, just like in any negotiation or anything, you want to talk to them first about it, yeah, and tell them about that. So I would suggest that you consult the local government unit called the Philippine Disabilities Awareness Office, or PIDAO, about this, because they have the procedures and such to gain this tax incentive. So yeah, if it were me, in my experience working with companies, yeah, do disclose it. Yeah, because it's a really good incentive for companies to do it. Okay. All right. Another question coming from Miss Milette Bruan Maria Benigno. This woman is one of my relatives. up north in the Pangasinan province. If there are any of you outside of Metro Manila watching this, shout out to you. Hello, and the question is, how can I help a child when he continues to isolate himself from others because of his condition? All right, make him watch this channel, right? Okay, the but that's not it's a funny answer, but it's let me explain to you why. Okay, not necessarily just this channel, but that person is probably isolated because of so many factors, trauma. Some of the stuff we talked about in this video so far, performance anxiety, being bullied, right? Diba? So what that person needs to understand, okay, because by the way, even people who are introverts, okay, this is a common misconception of people who are introverts, that they don't need to interact with other people. Most people I know, even those with neurodevelopmental conditions and such, the most introverted ones, the ones who tend to isolate themselves, they also crave for human contact. They just don't crave it in the same quantity as we do. So in this sense, what I would say is, what I would say is, you need to put this person in a place where he or she is convinced that it's a safe space. Okay? So that can be in the clinic of a psychologist, in a support group of some sort, If you want me to message this person and such, right? So what I'm saying is that you can send him videos of, you can send him videos of Project Bond here to perhaps the parents or this person, and then I'd be happy to give this person a message, right? In Project Bond, we've established many social groups who were comprised of people who wanted to isolate themselves, but now they interact with one another on a frequent basis. So they have that social groups, but it takes work to establish those things, right? Okay, it's not an instant process. So that's what I would say. Okay, so thank you for that. Okay. So we're gonna go onwards to our last question. Okay, our last question for today. But you guys have any comments, any questions? We can just prolong this a little bit. Please comment down below if you have any more questions or any follow-up questions. If any of your questions were answered here and you feel like they were not answered quite as much, please re-comment them down below, ask a follow-up question. I'd be happy to answer it for you. Okay? So the last question here is, despite that I have Asperger's, will people be considerate to me? Okay? Well, being considerate, I would say, is a matter of grace, isn't it? Right? Being considerate, I think, is, I would say, it's not a problem of you, but it's more of a problem of other people. If they're not considerate to you, then it doesn't matter whether you have the condition or not, right? I think considerate people, patient people, understanding, compassionate people will always be all of those things: compassionate, considerate, caring, right? Regardless of whether you have a condition, right? Okay. So, but I'd like to tell you this: our society, at least Philippine society so far, has been more accepting. Okay, universities have accepted people with neurodevelopmental conditions, disclosed neurodevelopmental conditions, and have placed support systems in the schools at a rate we've never seen before. We've seen the government give tax incentives, and companies take advantage of those tax incentives, right, at a rate we've never seen before. So, yeah, I do believe that there is a lot of consideration here and there, okay? So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, I think we got another comment here from Miss Millette as well. Okay, so shout out to Ma'am Wilma de la Cruz Ligot. Okay, she's a good consultant for nutrition, by the way. It's been very helpful to the ADHD Society of the Philippines and all members of the ADHD Society of the Philippines. Shout out to you. I miss you. I love you guys. Right? Says here, Ma'am Wilma says she agrees. Most of the time, kids isolate themselves because of safety and security issues. So yeah, that's what you need to address. And there's a comment here. Thank you as well, Millette, okay, for commenting. Okay, so these were interesting, excellent questions that allowed me to get to know you guys. And if you guys learned anything from this live session, I would say I learned a lot more from your concerns, and that helps me. Direct and focus the attention a little bit more in the coming videos. Okay, now, based on what I see from the questions, just want to tell you guys, My video next week will be a topic on something that is also common among people with neurodevelopmental conditions, and that is the topic of failure, okay, and its place in your life, okay. So we'll be posting something tomorrow for you guys on this page, on in the conversations page, and also on the Facebook page. So just before I end, I want to tell you guys, if you enjoyed this, if you learned from this, if you think this helped you, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Please give a like on our Facebook page. Please also join our Facebook group, Project Pond Conversations, where we have positive conversations about neurodevelopmental issues as well as their comorbid mental health concerns, right? So yeah, and a shout out to my wife, by the way, who's been assisting me here in our first live performance. We only had one technical issue, right? And it's a good thing we're also ending because my tablet right now just prompted battery power low. So we now know it lasts about an hour, right? Okay. So yeah. So everybody, we'll see you next time or next Q&A sessions. I'd like to see you guys as well in the Project Pond conversation section. So I'll be going now. This is Coach John of Project Pond. I'm signing off. God bless you guys.